Hi and welcome to this week's GMBN Tech Show. Coming up on the show we have a look at new bikes from YT and Antidote. We also explore bikes with pull shocks on, something a little bit old and we don't really see much anymore. And there's some awesome top mods for you lovely lot. Okay, so we're going to go straight into news this week. There's no topic as such because I actually want to pick up a bunch of things in the comments section because we're kind of overwhelmed actually with the amount of comments from you after last week's show, so we'll get there shortly. In the meantime, let's jump to news and that new YT Izzo Uncaged model. This is it on screen in laser yellow. How rude does that look? Yeah, so the bike's got 120mm travel front and rear. It's got very progressive geometry, 5 sizes from small through to double XL. And this particular one, running 120 front and rear, is very much geared up, reflecting a sort of downcountry sort of movement, tongue-in-cheek, you know, gnarly XC, who am I kidding? That's exactly where it's going. So you've got a SID Ultimate Deluxe on the front, and you've got the SID Lux Ultimate Rear Shock on there. You've got full SRAM access compatibility across the bike there, and it's absolutely loaded with stuff. So spec-wise and stuff, you've also got the RockShox twist lock to operate the rear shock lockout on there. And across those 5 sizes, the reach you're looking at is between 432 and 517mm. So for a 120 bike, that is a very long progressive bike. Head angle adjustable, you've got a flip chip in the frame there. So not only does it adjust the head angle, also adjust that seat angle slightly. So you're talking 66.5 degrees to 66.9 degrees. Seat angle 77.5 to 77.9. So really quite steep actually. 432mm chainstays. Now, interestingly, on the geometry chart on the bike, they seem to be making a bit of a deal of the stack measurement. Now, on geometry charts of all brands, you'll see stack referred to now, and it's the one everyone kind of leaves alone in the mountain bike world, pretty much because it's not quite as relevant in terms of the overall geometry and ride feeling of a bike. Whereas if you're talking road bikes in the road world, stack's really quite important to get the actual height of the bike correct and really your frontal position on there. So I think they're being quite telling who they're aiming this bike at. You'll see this looked at quite a lot in cross country as well. So quite a serious measurement to see sort of highlighted on the website. Quite cool, I think. Now they're saying this weighs between 25.1 pounds and 11.4 kilograms for a size medium. Bit of rocket ship, I reckon. I think that is a serious bit of kit. Love to sling a leg over one of those. Next up in news is actually some news from Atherton Bikes. Now they're actually not a new bit of bike, not a new anything as such, except for the fact you'll be able to buy them from the 18th of this month onwards. So that is 18th of January 2022. That is if things go according to plan. Now it's quite interesting, when G came to see us, I think back in, I'm going to say November 2020, I can't lose track of time, it was around then, just before Christmas. He was telling us about the plan and how things were going to move forwards. Obviously, it's a huge scale operation, and they actually had to buy some of the Renishaw additive manufacturing machines to put into their facility in North Wales to actually do this. Now, G was telling us a little bit about the intended pricing, but I haven't actually got confirmed pricing until the site goes live. But from what he told me, the pricing of the bikes, yeah, no doubt, they're not budget bikes by any means, but what you're getting in terms of technology and customizable bikes, I think it's quite phenomenal. I think it's a really interesting outfit, and actually we're due to go and see them about now. We just haven't sorted their act out, to be honest, and get up there to go and see them, because I want to be looking at how they actually sort of cut down the carbon tubes, how they bond them into those titanium printed lugs, which are additive manufactured from powdered titanium. Amazing design concept. So really looking forward to going up and see them, and of course catching up with Dan, Rach and G. So look out for that one on GMBN Tech soon. Now, another new bike. This one is from Antidote Bikes. Now, this is a brand actually that Steve Jones never shuts up about. So this is the guy that talks nothing but e-bikes, and this is one of the bikes that's a non-e-bike that he still will not stop talking about. So the traditional one, or the older one, had 27.5-inch wheels. This new version of the Darkmatter is 29-inch wheels, so very much bang up to date. And as you can see, this is a serious looking bike. I mean, look at the thing. The layout of that bike just looks amazing. So, downhill race bike made from carbon and Vectron composite. There are 3 sizes, medium, large and extra large options. 29-inch wheels, but also mullet compatibility. So it does accept a 27.5-inch wheel on the back end there. That's not just fitting one in and forgetting it, it's adjustable geometry there to cater for that. Now it's 200mm travel on the rear with a mullet setup, 190mm travel with a 29-inch wheel in there, just to fit everything into the bike to make it work properly. Now it's got a high anti-squat number, and it's also got 100% anti-rise. So anti-rise is essentially the effect that braking has on that rear suspension. So what they're trying to tell us here is with the anti-squat on there, essentially you can pedal the thing really hard and it's not going to be getting bogging down. And then the opposite could be said with the anti-rise number. So 100% means that braking really is going to have little or no effect in terms of what it does to the suspension. You might have heard of brake jack or brake squat, where the suspension can move either way according to the braking. You can lock it up, you can scrub the brake, or you can ignore the brake. The bike is going to feel exactly the same no matter what you're doing. So you're still going to get the 190 or the 200mm travel, skidding across the rocks, whatever you're doing. So impressive stuff there. Now it's also got a high pivot design. It's got an idler wheel there to tame that high pivot and the chain growth, which I think is up to 20mm on the back end of this bike. And also it's got a split pivot on there as well. So you get all the benefits you would with a single pivot, except you can decouple that rear braking, so hence that 100% anti-rise on there. Now geometry, you've got a head angle of 63 degrees, pretty much standard these days with downhill bikes. The reach 445, 475 and 505mm. Now here's the cool bit. Now they call this golden ratio geometry. Okay, I hear what you're saying. There's a lot of people talk about the geometry being like the main thing on their bike, and everyone's gone longer, lower and slacker. And now this bike certainly is long, low and slack, but what they've done interestingly is proportionally, they've made the chainstay slightly longer and the front end slightly shorter. So you've still got a long bike, but they're positioning your body weight better between the two wheels, which arguably for downhill racing, that has got to be a better thing. So those chainstays are a bit longer than some brands out there, 442 and 449mm, depending on how you run those. Now the frame is available with no shock for €4,999, and you get a choice of shocks as well if you want to buy one with the bike, Fox, Öhlins or EXT, which all mount sideways, interestingly. That's partially to get access to the shock itself, but also to keep standover height as low as possible with that bike design. And complete builds from €9,999. And all I'm going to say is, look at this shot. This raw one, oh my God, that thing is bloody gorgeous, I tell you. Right, next up is just some stuff I've seen on Instagram, and actually this is something quite old that's just flashed up again. So Elevation Wheel Company, I'm not even sure where they're based. I actually was made aware of this product by Toolbox Wars. So if anyone out there has a DT Swiss hub and you've ever had to try and change the ratchet, you'll know you get yourself a hernia trying to undo that thing. You need the longest breaker bar in the world, or just some sort of workshop mechanic that's just built like an outhouse. Absolutely ridiculous trying to get those undone. So these guys have made an impact gun compatible version. Genius. Why has no one done that before? Annoyingly, having seen this, I realised I missed out on pre-sales, and that's what this advert was for, the pre-sales. But if you're a mechanic in a bike shop or you work with DT, do yourself a favour, just get one of these. It looks like a great bit of kit. And next up, something else I saw on Instagram as well. This is from SRAM. I really quite like this when companies the size of SRAM actually show some of their prototype equipment. So Flight Attendant was launched last year, and as you know, it's an electronic wireless setup that communicates with access controllers and touch points to adjust your suspension. Look at the prototype one. This is it on screen. Come a long way, haven't they? I actually quite like this sort of stuff, and I might get in touch with a few brands and see what prototype stuff they're willing to share. So I think it's really interesting having a look at that. Anyone out there seen any random prototype stuff? If you have, let us know in those comments. You know what to do. Intense posted this on their social feed, which I just love. Look at the picture now. It's an M16 downhill bike and a little kid's balance bike to match. I don't think I've seen a cooler matching setup anywhere out there than this. It's just the coolest looking thing. It's definitely tugging on my heartstrings. Now, has anyone out there seen, or has anyone actually customised one of their kids' bikes to match their bike? You know what to do. Get involved. And one last one, completely random actually. I was watching Kids TV with Dustin the other day at the weekend. There's a program called Show Me How, which I'd never watched before. And Joe from Styling Bikes was on it. And it was just a really cool program. He's talking with the kids on the program about how bicycles are made and all about balance and stuff. And it was a great thing. It's made me thought, hold on, mountain biking and mountain biking tech is actually getting on TV now, explaining stuff like this. It must be other places. So where has anyone out there watching this show seen someone from the bike industry or mountain biking on TV that's not directly content like racing or anything like that? Just love to know. There must be some cool stuff out there to watch. Share it down there. Cheers, guys. Okay, quiz time. That means 3 questions coming at you, so no cheating, and see if you can get any of these. So first one on screen, K2 Bikes. Right, now the name comes from the snowboard world. I'm sure people have heard of K2 snowboards and skis and stuff. Obviously the mountain too. But what was the brand that K2 bought and remodelled as K2? So just to clarify, they'd never made any bikes themselves. They came into the bike industry, bought an existing brand, and then started working with them to develop bikes they wanted. What was that brand? Little clue for you, the brand made some of the earliest full suspension bikes. Next question. In the road bike world, it's fairly common to have bike brands named after their founders. Colnago, Pinarello, Bianchi are just a few examples here. Now, Atherton Bikes recently have appeared, and they're a great example of this in the mountain bike world. But what brand did the Atherton family used to ride for that was also named after its founder? And the last question, which bike company made a bike called the Eldridge Grade, and what was it named after? Okay, comments time. Now, kind of overwhelmed actually by the comments from last week's show. Just talking about stuff this year, where you wanted to see the channel going, content you'd like to see us making, and loads of comments from everyone, literally. I think there's like 305 comments or something, so loads, ranging from going to World Cups, modifying budget bikes, bike packing, suspension explainers, fat bike riding, bike build, story time stuff, collaborations, even making bikes. So much stuff in there, so we're definitely going to be developing some of these into videos and making videos this year on that stuff. There's some brilliant stuff in there, but I'm just going to go through some of the comments that made me grin a bit. So Matt Knowles says, I would love a feature like Pimp My Ride, where a viewer with an old bike gets a pimped out ride. Either the bike gets upgraded with all new gear and parts, or an entirely new bike. Yeah, the new bike thing, I may as well just give you a bike. I definitely love the idea of pimping someone's bike up. I think it's a great idea. That was like an MTV show, wasn't it? I can't remember who was in it, it was like 50 Cent or someone, Busta Rhymes maybe? I don't know, but I like that idea. I think that's really cool. So yeah, I'm going to borrow that one. Andre Lopez says, Doddy, just want to say congratulations on another year of GMBN. Been a fan since the beginning. Wow. Okay, so he's also a fan since the beginning of GMBN as well, back in 2015. I'd love to see a sort of series in GT. In fact, actually, I'm going to skip this and go to the really good bit because you've got a really detailed comment here. Maybe we can get a change for this year with some live coaching and actually try and teach a newbie how to do something in the actual video, which I know you guys have done once or twice, but I'd love to see more. That's a great idea, actually. Maybe we can get like a pro mechanic or myself or someone teaching some people how to do some of the basic stuff, or anything for that matter. I think it's a really good consideration. And your whole comment, actually, we're just going to post it on screen for others to sort of read because there's some really good stuff in there. So thanks for taking the time to write that one. Next up's from Joshua Nichols. It would be epic to do a used bike showdown with GCN Tech. Maybe Doddy could build a gravel bike and Ollie can build a mountain bike. Maybe up the pressure with budgets. I love those. That is a wicked idea. Ollie on GCN Tech is great fun, and I reckon I could stitch him up a treat as well if we sort of swap this into riding things. Although that said, he's lost so much weight recently, his strength to power ratio, it'll take me to cleaners, wouldn't he? But I reckon it's good fun. We'll do that. Clay Brunson, it'd be interesting to see how a pro mechanic works differently to an amateur. Maybe something similar to the beginner versus amateur versus pro, but building a bike from the ground up. Hey, do you know what? That's a great idea. Maybe you could do a bike shop mechanic. You could do someone like myself that knows about it but doesn't necessarily do it, and then a proper pro from a World Cup or something. They work in very different ways because they work on very specific things on bikes, but they definitely have shortcuts for a lot of things. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. Next up, from Inalienable, I really hope to see Doddy at Sea Otter geeking out this year. I'll tell you what, we all really want to go to Sea Otter. In fact, I'm doing my US visa at the moment, so fingers crossed, everything goes according to plan. Next up from Steve McDonald. It'd be interesting to see a capable older model bike upgraded with new geometry from angle sets, fork offset, cockpit, etc. And then compared back to a new model with similar suspension. Hey, do you know, that's a great shout. I wonder if it's if we price this up, if you could sort of get more out of your current bike than spending on a newer bike. I'm all in favour of working with your current bike, so I think that is a really, really good idea. The only thing I could see as a potential issue with mountain bike stuff is the rate at which standards sort of move on. You might get stuck on some things with compatibility, but I'm sure we could draw a line. It'd probably be something, maybe a 27.5-inch wheels, you know, like a 6-inch travel bike. We could probably turn that into a full enduro sort of capable bike to match today's bikes. Yeah, great idea. Next up from Alex Harris. As a retro guy, I'd love to see Doddy visit mountain bike collectors. I've started my own retro GT collection over the past 2 years, 6 so far, but there's some serious guys out there with more impressive collections. Hey, we're definitely going to do that. You know, I don't want to sort of put too much retro stuff on the channel. Like, I clearly love that and people know that, but the channel is trying to be inclusive about everything with mountain bike tech. But that said, GT Retro Tech Shop have got arguably one of the finest collections of GT retro stuff. So just referencing what you've written, I will be going to see them at some point for sure. And finally, from Tim Novak, I'd love to see more of other presenters on tech. For Ask GMBN Tech, for example, it'd be great to have Neil or Blake with you. Also have some more fun content like build-offs, repair challenges and stuff like that. Well, you'll have to see what's coming up, won't you? Okay, so clearly in a new year, so all our best stuff on the show, in my opinion, is the stuff from you guys. So the user-generated stuff. We're talking Rewind, Top Mods, and of course Bike Cave. So if you have anything cool in any of those realms, please use our uploader service. So on screen, you should be able to see how you want to be using that. There's going to be a link to it in the description underneath. All you got to do is click on it and it'll take you straight to it. Now it's dead easy to use. All you got to do is locate the thing that you want to put in there, the files, which will be hopefully on your desktop, somewhere like that, or perhaps on your phone, and use the uploader. Tell us a bit about you, tell us a bit about your bike or whatever it is that you're sending to us, and we'll put you on the show. It's that simple, so please do get involved. This week we're going to Rewind with an old bike that's got a pull shock on it. So on screen you should be able to see this now. Now this bike is a K2. Now this brand's kind of an interesting one because way back in the day there was a brand called Off-Road and they made bikes called Proflex and they came in and bought the brand basically, so they moved on from there. Now this one's called a Razorback and I actually have never seen one of these in the flesh. I've only ever seen photos. It's kind of cool to see this one now. Now look at all the details on the chainstay here. So fork travel 3-inch or 4-inch, so you can obviously set the bike up in different ways. Position A, position B, it's giving you angles of the bike, rider weight with air pressure, like a full chart on the bike, seriously loaded. Now, something random that this bike hasn't got, K2 actually had, I can't think what they refer to it as, but it had these coil shocks on the front and rear of a particular bike, and it had almost like an electronic assistance thing built into it that would kind of have an accelerometer built in there and it would automatically lock out. They did that way back in the early 90s, so it's kind of insane the tech that they had involved on this stuff. Anyway, so this one's from Ireland, says saw the bike for sale, didn't know anything about the brand or what it's for, but I like the way the damper looks, so I bought it. It's got old XT cranks and stuff on there, so sparing you all the details here, but look at some of the shots. So you've got carbon seat stays on there, you've got a low pivot, you've got a pivot on the seat stay, so that's a single pivot with a linkage driven shock, but look at the shock on that. So it's pretty cool to see it's got a pull shock on there. Now I can never quite work out why manufacturers were so insistent on putting a pull shock on a bike, because other than skipping some weight off, because you don't have to have a mount on the top tube of this bike to mount the shock on there, or any bike using one, I really can't see a reason for using one other than having to have a proprietary shock system. This one actually has a Fox vanilla, no, it's a Fox Float RL on there, I was wrong. But mega interesting to see. There's something kind of weird about seeing that floating shock just hanging in the middle of nowhere there. Bizarre look. I think the bike looks really cool. It's nice to see and it looks like immaculate condition given that that's what, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s perhaps, hard to tell looking at that particular one, but mega nice to see. It's actually made me think there's a few other really cool vintage bikes that used to, well not quite vintage but old school bikes that used to use pull shocks, and the obvious ones that come to mind are Schwinn and Yeti. So on screen you should be able to see the Schwinn, so they had the straight 8, they had the 4 banger and the straight 6. All of them had this parallelogram linkage on the rear end, so essentially a 4-bar linkage. But the way it worked, enabling the axle to go straight up and down, was so plush, and anyone that rode them would tell you could literally ride this thing through rocks and stuff. Just amazing. I mean, these things weighed a ton anyway. I think they had something like 18 bearings on the back end, just bonkers. You know how much a bearing weighs, so all of that additional weight you don't need. And here's the Yeti version. So this is I think this one's a 4-inch one. I saw this one at the Malverns randomly. But again, same configuration back end as the Schwinn. Worked super well when the shock wasn't leaking, but I don't know, kind of done, isn't it? That ship has sailed. Just a couple other random things I just want to share with you. The first one of which is this post that Gary Fisher put up on his Instagram. It's his very first advert for mountain bikes. I think it's really cool. If you don't follow him on Instagram, well, follow him. He's the guy that started it all, or at least put the name on the map. And another one, kind of stemming from the same thing, is this signpost from Marin County. And if you look at the top of it, it says, Eldridge Grade. Now, Eldridge Grade is a really famous trail in Marin County, of course, where Marin Bikes are from. But just, it's cool stuff. Give them a follow as well. That's a museum of Marin County. Okay, now we've got time for some top mods as well. So don't forget, this is about the modifications you make to your bike or anything bike associated to make it better. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a new pair of handlebar grips, or you could be 3D printing something at home. Anything counts and it's all cool. So get involved in the uploader. Don't forget, in the link down there. Now this one's particularly cool. So this one's from G in Belgium, Flanders. I bought a Toe Peak 2-up stand for my daily commuter bike, so the bikes stack on top of each other. And gave them more space, it was easier to clean the floor, but my helmet didn't have a dedicated place. I love this. So with some leftover plywood, I made a helmet holder that would fit over the pole in the free space between the two bikes. I saw there was room for a heart rate monitor inside the helmet that I added a few days later. No design in mind for this. Steering stabiliser, just look at it, it's just ace. So the steering stabiliser, which is a secondary thing, that mounts on the bottom part of the stand, just stops the handlebars moving around if you knock the bike, which is just a nice simple thing. It's all about the helmet holder though, isn't it? Nice bit of wood design there. That's great, I love that. And the little storage pot on the inside to put your heart rate monitor in. And it just looks really nicely made. In fact, you could probably sell those if you pulled your finger out a bit. That's a lovely bit of machining. Love it, awesome stuff. And the next one, not quite as lovely, I've got to say. It's a bit Heath Robinson, but functional, no doubt. So this one's from Michael in South Africa. After seeing the DIY stem, I thought I'd share this project from a few years ago. Whilst converting my sister's old GT Avalanche into something that resembled a dirt jump bike, I ran into an issue going single speed, so I needed to essentially make a chain guide on there. So if you go back before narrow wide chain rings, when you don't need to run a chain guide on there, your chain would literally fall off. When you change the gear, going over bumpy terrain, chains used to fall off on bikes. So we used to make chain guides, then you used to buy chain guides. And this looks just like some of the earliest chain guides used by some of the earliest downhill racers. In fact, I remember chain guides like this called the Goat Gobbler and all sorts of random stuff from over the years. But it's very cool, actually, you know, and it obviously does the trick, keeps the chain in place, and well, job done. What more do you need to say about that? Awesome stuff there. Always good to see people thinking outside the box there to make creative stuff for their bikes. Great work, everyone. Okay, now time for some quiz answers just at the end of the show here. So the first question, just a reminder on the screen there about K2 bikes. And the clue I said was the brand made some of the earliest full suspension bikes. Anyone get it? It was Off-Road Bikes. Now Off-Road gave us the ProFlex, which a strange bike when it came out because it had a rigid fork on the front and it had a flex stem. And if you remember the flex stems, I've had one floating around here for a while. Might not be here now. But the flex stem I've got was a later one, and it said Gervin on the side. The original ones were Off-Road ProFlex and Off-Road Flex Stem, but the designer of the suspension system was Bob Gervin, and he gave us the Flex Stem. So, well, there you go. And it morphed into K2, and then they took the technology with bigger budget, started including computer technology and carbon fibre, loads of other cool stuff, but they're lovely bikes, really nice. Next up, in the road world, brands named after the founders. We talked about Pinarello, Colnago, Bianchi, and of course Atherton Bikes in the mountain bike world. Anyone know who it was they used to ride for? Gary Turner. And you know the brand as GT Bikes. An absolute BMX legend. Been making bikes, I think, since like 1986 or something like that. Way back. Very cool stuff. Probably older than that. I've probably just sworn there in retro speak. Last one, which bike company made a bike called the Eldridge Grade, and how did it get its name? Well, the bike company was Marin, and the bike was called the Eldridge Grade, named after Eldridge Grade, which was a big steep fire road, essentially. Something interesting about Marin bikes, so they were established in 1986 in Marin County by Bob Buckley, and the Eldridge Grade was actually designed partially, he had input into it, by the racer Joe Murray, who was also sponsored by Gary Fisher, and he later went on to design bikes and components for Kona. Been around, and as far as I know, he works with Shimano these days, helping develop stuff as part of the Skunk development scheme. All cool stuff. There we go, end of this week's show. It's been great to be back. Seriously excited about stuff coming up on the channel over the next few weeks and over the year. And thank you once again for all your amazing suggestions. And I'll see you soon. Ta-ra.